Welcome to Random Movie Reviews. I'm Nathan, and today I'll be talking about Die Another Day. So before I jump into the review, I just want to give a quick shout out to all the subscribers I've gotten recently, largely due to my past two Bond videos that I've done just a few days ago. Got a pretty big response and a lot of great comments and a lot of likes. So shout out to everybody who watched those videos, commented, liked, and subscribed because of those videos. And for those who are new to my channel, welcome. Where I'm just a film nerd who talks about any movie for any reason, not just Bond movies, but recently I've been in that mood. So that's why I've continued talking about Bond movies for the past couple of videos. And the reason I'm talking about this specific Bond movie today is because I think it would be a fun contrast to compare a Bond movie that is routinely named as being one of the worst Bond movies with the last Bond movie I did talking about GoldenEye, a film that is routinely named as being one of the best Bond movies, both starring the same Bond actor, Pierce Brosnan. I think Pierce Brosnan as a whole was a great Bond. Sure, his movies weren't the most consistent, even though I absolutely love Tomorrow Never Dies. I don't think it's as good as GoldenEye, but I think Tomorrow Never Dies is a very underrated Bond movie with one of the best Bond girls ever with Michelle Yeoh. Just an altogether super fun, fast-paced, one of the most action-packed Bond movies, and that, honestly, Tomorrow Never Dies would probably sneak in my top 10. That's how much I love that movie. The World Is Not Enough, a much more uneven movie for me, but I do like it, and I think Pierce Brosnan has the best Bond performance in that movie because of how emotional and vulnerable he portrays the character in a way we haven't seen in any of his other movies. Unfortunately, he went out on a fairly low note with Die Another Day. Now, recently, I made a list on Letterboxd. I looked up all of the Bond movies, all 25 of the official Bond films, looked at their average review ratings they got, and ranked them from best to worst according to those ratings. And at the very bottom was Die Another Day. Oof. Now, I mentioned in my Timothy Dalton video that I did, the reason I'm talking about a lot of these movies now is because last year I did a big Bond rewatch before I had my channel and YouTube set up and everything you see here. So a lot of those movies are fresh in my mind, and that's why I'm talking about them now. But Die Another Day was not one of those movies. In fact, I haven't seen Die Another Day since I was probably a kid. This is the first Bond movie that I saw in theaters, and I loved it. This is around the time that I was really getting into James Bond, both because of the movies and the video games. I think this was around the time that the video game Agent Under Fire was out. Absolutely loved that game. And Nightfire, I think, was around that time as well. But as I've gotten older and my tastes in movies have matured in some ways, Die Another Day has definitely fallen low in terms of rewatches in comparison to other Bond movies. So I haven't seen this, not even kidding, in probably over a decade. Watching it now, especially watching it right after watching GoldenEye, oh boy, you could see that the 007 franchise was in desperate need of doing something new and drastically different. And if it wasn't for this movie, I don't know if we would have gotten Casino Royale, my personal favorite Bond movie, where it is the anti-Die Another Day. Die Another Day is so campy and so absurd that it even puts some of the crazier Bond movies like Moonraker, like it makes Moonraker look not nearly as insane. I love Moonraker. In fact, it's probably my favorite Roger Moore movie, but the reason I love Moonraker is because I don't take Roger Moore seriously as Bond. To me, he is to James Bond what Adam West was to Batman. Just a fun, lighthearted, campy version of this iconic character. Whenever I'm in a schlocky action movie mood, Roger Moore is one of my go-tos, and Moonraker is one of my go-tos in terms of watching one of his specific movies. But the thing that I loved about Pierce Brosnan that was perfectly demonstrated in GoldenEye is that he knew how to walk that line in terms of being serious while also being fun and campy, but not leaning too far in either direction. And that's why I think GoldenEye is like the perfect Bond movie. Not the perfect movie, but the perfect Bond movie, meaning that even its imperfections, all the classic Bond illogical moments, like Bond being put in a helicopter with missiles coming at him, and conveniently there's just a giant eject button that he can easily headbutt to get out of the situation.
Meaning its imperfections are also perfect because they fall into line with the classic Bond formula.
It's like that classic line that Dr. Evil has in Austin Powers.
I'm going to leave them alone and not actually witness them dying. I'm just going to assume it all went to plan. What?
But GoldenEye still rides that line of being serious when it needs to be and also being fun and campy when it needs to be, and it just balances it perfectly. Die Another Day is way on the campy side. Die Another Day is enjoyable if you don't take it seriously and you have fun kind of laughing at it. But of course, I am talking about a Bond movie, which means Die Another Day has supporters. And there are probably people out there that's like, dude, fuck you, Die Another Day is actually a great movie. Well, we can have a difference in opinions, but I will laugh at your face if you actually tell me that this is like a good movie. Like, let's now get into why this movie is fucking ridiculous. The opening of the film, we have James going into North Korea undercover to assassinate a North Korean colonel by the name of Tan Sun Moon, who we find out later in the movie is going to get quite the makeover change. He's trading in conflict diamonds in exchange for military weapons, but of course this is just an excuse for Bond to get in there, assassinate this dangerous colonel, and get out. That's the mission. But unfortunately, he gets made by the colonel's henchman, Zhao, resulting in the opening action sequence in this movie where Bond commandeers a hovercraft, and we have a hovercraft chase action sequence that's actually a lot of fun and pretty rad, with Bond firing a MAC-10. And before that, Bond sets off the C4 that's in the diamonds, embedding them into Zhao's face, making him look real pretty. And it's classic Bond stuff. In fact, the first half of this movie feels like classic Bond stuff. There is a specific moment where it totally goes off the rails, which, believe me, we'll get into. So after chasing the colonel on a hovercraft and the colonel flying off a cliff with the hovercraft, James unfortunately gets captured by the North Koreans because there was a double agent that exposed his identity. And then we get to the theme of this movie where we see Bond being tortured hilariously with the Madonna Die Another Day theme song in the background. One of the worst, probably the worst Bond theme song. Honestly, it is horrendous, this fucking song. And I'm not even a Madonna hater. I like Madonna. Borderline, Like a Prayer, Holiday, she's got some legit bangers. She is totally the wrong type of person to do a Bond theme song. And this is a perfect example of that, with that horrible early 2000s techno bop bullshit. Oh, it's so bad, but you can dance to it. So after Bond is tortured and captured for 14 months, he ends up getting free due to an exchange with Zhao, who also got captured. They're trading prisoners. North Koreans get Zhao and MI6 get Bond. Bond is then effectively fired by M for being captured and becoming a liability for MI6. But Bond is pissed that he got double-crossed, so he is looking to get some revenge. He then goes to Cuba, where he gets some intel that Zhao is there for reasons he doesn't know yet. He's going to go find out. Then we get introduced to Halle Berry, the Bond girl Jinx, who is quite gorgeous and attractive. And, you know, Halle Berry has proven herself to be a legitimately very talented actress. That is not demonstrated in this movie at all. Her performance is quite awful. Honestly, it's really not that much better than Denise Richards in The World Is Not Enough. I think it's quite bad.
Who sent you?
Your mama. And she told me to tell you she's really disappointed in you.
And that's not really her fault. I think the way the character is written is pretty thankless. She is one of the most, pointless, horribly written Bond girls ever. And the chemistry between her and Pierce Brosnan is not exactly great. But we find out that she's an NSA agent, and of course she's going to be helping Bond later on in the movie. Fast forward to the part where Zhao escapes and Bond learns about this gene therapy stuff where people can completely change their face, apparently, in this futuristic sci-fi machine. Due to some conflict diamonds being left behind by Zhao that looked similar to the ones that Bond encountered in North Korea, he ends up finding out that the diamonds belong to a man named Gustav Graves, a British billionaire who literally just came out of nowhere, but for those who've seen this movie, you know exactly why. Bond gets introduced to him through a hilarious fencing scene, which starts off as like a friendly competition and very quickly escalates into a macho man action sequence that is quite hilarious and a bit over the top, but it's nothing in comparison to some of the stuff we're going to see later on in this movie. That's where Bond also meets the secondary Bond girl in this movie, played by Rosamund Pike, who plays the undercover MI6 agent Miranda Frost. And from there, James believes that Gustav Graves is somehow involved with his experiences in North Korea because of these conflict diamonds, and he's investigating to see what's up with this dude. How did he become a billionaire? Why did he come out from nowhere? And that's where M reinstates him back in the MI6, ordering him to follow Gustav Graves and get some intel and information on him. So the first half of this movie starts off For the most part, pretty straightforward classic Bond stuff. It's nothing too outlandish or crazy, right? But there is a specific moment where this movie goes off the rails, and it's the scene where we see Bond in the MI6 building, he's cleaning his gun, and then he hears some noises, and we see that terrorists somehow have infiltrated the MI6 base. He's shooting at him. We see that M is captured by one of them. He shoots the hand of the terrorist, and then he shoots the terrorist. But the terrorist then freezes in midair, and it's like, what the fuck? And then John Cleese, who plays the new quartermaster, Q, who was introduced in The World Is Not Enough, walks into this virtual reality, and we see that Bond was wearing these special virtual sunglasses for training sequences that are apparently so real, like entering the Matrix, essentially. Oh my god. And it gets even crazier from there, where we get introduced to the invisible Aston Martin, the V12 Vanquish, or the V12 Vanish. And that's when we get to the point where it's like, okay, this is almost like Austin Powers level of dumb. From there, Bond goes to this ice castle that's also like a hotel resort thing, where Graves is giving this lecture and demonstration of this new project he's working on, with creating a satellite sun to help crops grow around the world and end world hunger and world peace, right? That's what he claims for it to be. But we find out that Graves, who was the North Korean colonel at the beginning of this movie, got this magical facial reconstruction surgery to look like this British white man, created this crazy scheme to change his appearance, to become this British billionaire. All of this in the span of 14 months, by the way. And we know that because that's how long Bond was held captured since the beginning of this movie, where we saw he was the colonel and he went flying off the cliff. In a matter of 14 months, he became a billionaire, reestablished a new identity, became famous in England because of this, was successfully able to create a satellite sun space laser thing, which, by the way, I wonder how that conversation went with, like, did he talk to NASA, or is there like a British equivalent of NASA where he's like, hey guys, I have this idea for making the satellite that can, harness the energy of the sun. Was anyone like, wait a minute, are you going to use that as an evil space laser? He's like, no, please. That's ridiculous. Well, the joke's on us, because yes, he's using the Icarus satellite, as he calls it, to cut a path through the Korean demilitarized zone with the sunlight laser beam, thus allowing the North Korean troops to invade South Korea. That's his whole magical plan, and he's doing this magical plan while wearing his magical RoboCop suit, where he can control the space laser with his Nintendo Power Glove. And that's where we get ridiculous action sequences, like the very infamous scene where Bond is driving like this F1 ice car. I don't know what the hell that thing is, but he's driving it. The laser's chasing him down. It's horrible CGI with this awful green screen compositing effect that looks so cheap and phony. He's driving away from this space laser, and then the scene where he uses the grappling hook on the vehicle and to throw himself over the cliff, but to keep hanging on. Literally, I mean, that scene looks like somebody threw a toy off the edge of a little miniature and it landed there. Oh god, it looks so bad. And then Bond takes out the parachutes from the back of it and takes the hood of the car or whatever that vehicle is and uses it to windsurfing, essentially, with some of the most seamless special effects you've ever seen. To this day, they look amazing. I'm kidding, of course. They look like complete dog shit. And then throughout the movie too, I mean, Bond has always been known for his one-liners, but man, in Die Another Day, there are so many bad one-liners, so many.
Saved by the Bell.
I see you handle your weapon well.
I have been known to keep my tip up.
I'm Mr. Kill.
Well, there's a name to die for.
I take it Mr. Bond's been explaining his Big Bang Theory.
Oh, yeah, I think I got the thrust of it.
You know, I've missed your sparkling personality.
How's that for a punchline?
I can read your every move.
Read this, bitch.
And then there's also the scene where Bond has to go save Jinx from these laser robot mechanical arm things. That scene gets pretty ridiculous. And then we get to the finale in this where Graves takes his giant airplane and he has his father come on board, who his father believes he was dead, but he reveals that, no, I'm your son. And telling him of his crazy plan, he's like, yeah, I'm going to use this space laser to initiate a war between North Korea and South Korea. His dad's like, what are you, fucking nuts? They're going to fire nukes at us. He's like, don't worry about it. We'll just destroy the nukes. I got this Nintendo Power Glove, man. use this bad boy, blow those nukes out of the sky. And that's where everything goes to shit. Bond and Jinx are on the plane. Window gets shot out. Dudes are getting violently sucked out of the plane, which is always hilarious to see. We get a amazing sword fight between Jinx and Miranda Frost, who is revealed to be the 00 agent who double-crossed James in the most obvious and predictable twist in this whole movie. We do get a great final one-liner before Bond kills Graves, which is pretty awesome.
Time to face destiny!
Time to face gravity!
And then we get more just really amazing and not cheap looking at all special effects with the helicopter and Jinx escaping with the helicopter that was conveniently on this plane with a bunch of the conflict diamonds in the back. And yeah, the movie ends with Moneypenny using the virtual sunglasses for some virtual porn, and James and Jinx being at some sort of bungalow with all of their diamonds. And yeah, it's a fucking masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. It's ridiculous, and it's pretty obvious to why this movie is not really held in high regard by most Bond fans. I know there are fans of this movie out there, like there's a fan of every Bond movie out there. But Die Another Day can be enjoyable in terms of just a fun, guilty pleasure thing, but I mean, it's still hard to enjoy this movie for me on a satisfying level, because we knew what Brosnan was capable of in terms of being a Bond, and he was really genuinely let down by such an god-awful script and terrible direction. I mean, outside of the really bad visual effects that are throughout this whole fucking movie, which is this awful CGI. I mean, the early 2000s was not a good time for a lot of big blockbuster action movies. And then the directional choices in this movie with like these weird slow pan shots and changing of the shutter speed to make it look like an MTV music video. It just looks so stupid. But there are entertaining moments in this movie. I mean, there's that whole car chase, which literally feels like a stage in one of the Bond video games between James and Zhao, where the cars are shooting each other and they're driving through the melting ice palace that got hit with the Icarus sunbeam. That's a pretty fun action sequence. It's not a boring movie, and that's why I don't think I can rate it as being the absolute worst Bond movie, because the worst Bond movies to me are the ones that are really, really dull. And there's a couple of more movies that I think I would put A View to a Kill below Die Another Day, personally. I think Die Another Day is actually fun to watch, even though I can acknowledge it's really, really fucking stupid. But A View to a Kill is, it's just a fucking snooze fest. And Christopher Walken, who's a brilliant actor, I mean, he's just kind of wasted in that movie, honestly. And just like Halle Berry's wasted in this movie, I mean, these are two of the lamest Bond girls ever, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, it may not be the worst Bond movie, but I think it just might be the dumbest Bond movie. Yes, even dumber than Moonraker, but I still think Moonraker is pretty rad. Anyway, guys, that's my thoughts on Die Another Day, but I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear from the Bond fans out there, not only what your thoughts are when it comes to this specific Bond movie, but what your opinion is as the absolute worst Bond movie. Mention it in the comments below, and as always, thank you guys for watching.